Dear friends, allergic rhinitis is commonly found in clinical practice, especially in the consulting rooms of general pediatrician. But it is the most underdiagnosed common condition, and the major hurdle is I would not say lack of knowledge, but the middle hurdle is treatment options and how to investigate. So, dear friends, to know in depth about allergic rhinitis, I really thank Praveen and his team of Alembic for giving me opportunity to present my view as a general pediatrician towards treatment of allergic rhinitis. Thank you.
Good evening, dear doctors. I am Dr. Dinesh Patil. Welcome you all on behalf of Alembic Pharmaceutical Limited for this today's scientific activity, Media Talk. The concept of this program is to discuss the clinical issues faced by you in day-to-day office practice. Today we have our expert in subject, Dr. Abasaheb Patankar, is MD and DCH. He is an alumni of Grant Medical College and having a rich experience of 24 years in pediatric practice, specialized in intensive care and neonatology. Today, sir will going to deliver a talk on allergic rhinitis. Now, I request our speaker, Dr. Patankar sir, to start the presentation. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for nice words. I am basically, good evening, friends. I am Dr. Abasaheb Patankar. I am a practicing pediatrician from Maharashtra, Raigad district since last 24 years. And I really thank Alembic and my dear friend Praveen and his team for providing me this platform to talk on allergic rhinitis. I am a generalist, so I have kept the name of this topic as a allergic rhinitis from generalist perspective. I am really thank you, Praveen and his team, for allowing me to prepare my own slides and give me a freedom of talking what I feel about the subject. At the same time, I really thank my dear colleagues from Raigad IIP. At the same time, all over the India, those who have joined for this session. Today is Monday. It's a busy day for pediatricians. It's evening time, but still I could see almost around 130, 131 on board. So it's really a commendable response to Alembic, and I will try to stand to your expectation as the as we move ahead with the presentation. As a generalist, I always feel that we have got a limited type of a scope in a practice. Like that, we always see cough, cold, fever, vomiting, loose motion, and some sort of a very common type of a disorders, maybe infantile colic, some newborns here and there. And we get ourselves restricted to prescribing a very limited type of drugs and very limited type of, if I really count in my prescription, I must be not writing more than 20 drugs since I have started my practice almost around 24 years back. But over a period of time, I realized that if you take interest in some subjects and if you try to see the patient from different perspective, try to analyze the case and try to do something by which at your end, you can do the things which would bring a lot of changes in the patient's basically response, or we can say in the patient's disease or patient's benefit. So I thought allergic rhinitis is a topic where in a day-to-day practice, we always see when a patient of cold comes to you recurrent, what we'll end up in prescribing some sort of antihistaminic. Then if patient comes back again, then it is our own habit of prescribing antihistaminic with montelukast. Then sometimes if the patient comes back again, then we feel like doing some investigation, like somebody will do CBC, we'll find some eosinophils here and there. Somebody would like to do IgE, it will be some raised around 150, 200 and 500, whatever it may be. And then you feel it is a case of some allergic disorder. And if it has got a rhinitis, then allergic rhinitis. And since the patient has come to you again and again, now it's a time you to refer to a specialist. And that is a respect where you are supposed to refer when the patient comes with a repeated type of symptoms and not getting relief from your treatment. Then the patient goes to a specialist and then there the difference is found. What is the difference you found? The patient as goes to the specialist from generalist consultation as a reference, the approach to see that patient from a different angle changes the perspective totally. Patient basically undergoes good investigations, undergoes good treatment modalities, and by which the patient's symptoms just abate within no time, maybe a week or 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and patient feels better. His life becomes very much better. So I thought, why not we take interest in common disorders where just getting halted at Montelukast and levocetirizine or Montelukast and some other combination. Let us move further and try to see what specialists are doing in the field. So they are doing allergy test, which is not our domain at all. They are doing immunological therapies. It is also not a domain at all. But if you have got something, the way asthma we have explored ourselves, now all generalists are almost as good as, not as good, but at least better in asthma, not definitely better than specialists, but they are doing inhalation therapy, they are doing nebulizers and everything, and they are managing moderate to severe asthma to such a tune that they are quite happy. The parents are quite happy because there is a standard protocol which they are following. So in this allergic rhinitis, if we follow a standard protocol of a treatment where the role of intranasal corticosteroids plays a major difference, and then hence this talk. Let us move. Am I audible, madam? Madam?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. We are,
Yeah,
you are audible,
okay. So let me start with the disclaimer. My friends, this presentation is not for promotion of any pharma product. And this liberty has been given to me by Alembic platform. Thank you again for that. What is the scope of this presentation? We should know about the allergic rhinitis, its the treatment options. We should get sensitized to use intranasal corticosteroids. That is the major crux of my topic. And if at all, if the time permits, then some preventive measures. But this topic does not include asthma, atopy, or chronic rhinosinusitis. And what would be the end point? I always learned that if you start somewhere, you have to have some end point. And this end point would be, we should be able to diagnose allergic rhinitis in true sense. And you should be confident about using intranasal steroids. Let me tell you, friends, I am not a specialist in allergy, but while preparing this topic, I have found so many new things because I have already started using intranasal steroids, and how a reading on that topic has basically fine-tuned my treatment that I have observed and that I'm experiencing. I think the similar experience you will have at the end of this session, and your time which you are going to be there with me for another 45 minutes will be definitely worth. I'll try to stand to your expectation again. So definition: allergic rhinitis or allergic rhinosinusitis is characterized by paroxysms of sneezing, rhinorrhea, and nasal obstruction. These are the cardinal features, often accompanied by itching of the eyes, nose, and palate. Other common symptoms are postnasal drip, cough, irritability, and fatigue. There are certain symptoms which are commonly seen, like snort. Snort means this is snort. Sniff means this is sniff. Cough, we all know, and sometimes they often clear their throats, like this is clearing of the throat. And due to there is a scratchy, itchy palate, they scratch. There is itchy palate, which is a feature of the allergic rhinitis. The people try to get pacified with rubbing the tongue against palate, and they produce typical classical sound, which is called a palate click. That way it is. So these are some symptoms which we commonly see. And why these people are calling allergic rhinitis as allergic rhinosinusitis, because it is most of the times goes hand in hand. But as far as this today's lecture is concerned, we are going to talk only about allergic rhinitis. Nose and sinus mucosa are contagious. Same mucosal lining is there in the sinuses. And most of the times, rhinitis and sinusitis occur together. Generally, when rhinitis is there, it leads to sinusitis, because more often we don't see sinusitis much in pediatric population. But if you go towards the adult and if you see the patients of allergic rhinitis, the way they growing older, if they are not treated properly, they are going to go ahead with developing sinusitis, which is a definitely troublesome issue. And sometimes those patients who have got only sinusitis, they have got nasal symptoms. So it is commonly called as rhinosinusitis. So let us see what is the epidemiology like. Generally, these are the data from USA, or you can say industrialized countries. So allergic rhinitis is commonly found over there. Incidence is around 10 to 30% in children and adults. As the child grows into adult, the incidence increases. If you see the prevalence at around 6 to 7 years, it is almost around 8.5%. And in 13 to 14 years, it is exactly almost double, 14%. So there are certain risk factors why all people don't get allergic rhinitis. Sometimes we know that somebody has got sensitized, but he is not symptomatic. So allergic rhinitis has got certain risk factors, like if there is a family history of atopy. Of course, we all know maternal smoking is a major risk factor. Somebody has got birth during pollen season, then it is a risk factor. A couple of days, we had a CME by Dr. Sridhar Ganpati, and he was talking a lot about microbiota. And this delivery, LSCS, poses a bit risk because there is a loss of exposure of that baby to vaginal and anal commensal. And microbiota, which the patient develops after cesarean section, he misses on that. So it is one of the risk factors. Of course, somebody who has got LSCS does not mean that he is a potential candidate to have allergic rhinitis, but it is just one of the factors, risk factors. Male sex is also another risk factor. Somebody who is firstborn in the family is a risk factor. Early use of antibiotics, again the same story here. Antibiotics causes a lot of dysbiosis, and which causes, there is a breach in the intestinal epithelium, which causes exposure of that epithelium to allergens, and which gets sensitized, and the reactivity occurs, and the patient gets allergic rhinitis. So one has to be very careful about prescribing antibiotics, as we have learned 2 days back by Dr. Sridhar Ganpati. Exposure to indoor allergens such as dust mite and allergens. There are two types of basically allergen. One is indoor allergen and one is outdoor allergen. So these two different, as the talk progresses, you will come to know why it is important. Somebody has got serum immunoglobulin, which is more than 100. You come across with somebody getting the report in your OPD with already serum IG has been done, and it is just a cutoff point which they have mentioned, more than 6 years and more than 100. There are chances that he may suffer from allergic disease. And somebody has got basically, you are seeing a patient who has been seen by specialist, and he has got an allergen specific IG antibody positive, then you know that it is a definite case of allergic rhinitis. It has got a tremendous impact on quality of life. That's the reason we are discussing. Though patient is sneezing, patient is coughing, patient has a little bit choky nose, patient has got difficulty in lying down, sleeping, sometimes he has got a headache, sometimes he has got earache, so many things are there. And this all affects the quality of life. When we see quality of life, we are quite, basically we always feel the quality of life should be okay. It has to be a quality of a life which matters a lot. So when a disease of allergic rhinitis comes, quality of life is definitely important, because it is not something which is a very morbid type of a disorder where you are going to be very badly sick, or you are going to have some sort of a life-threatening episode out of your allergic rhinitis, but it's a day-to-day irritation which you are going to suffer and going to have a lot of impingement on your life. So sometimes due to nose block, these people have got disturbed sleep. So daytime they are fatigued, they have got general malaise. They feel like dizzy, basically whole day they are not active as such. Certain developmental disorders are linked to allergic rhinitis, like attention deficit hyperactive disorder, Sometimes patient gets low exam scores, especially during peak pollen seasons when they suffer a lot. They have got a poor concentration because their fatigue, sleep is not proper. If they are some sort of a sports person, then they cannot cope up with their performance. And due to all this continuously runny nose, sneezing, coughing, they feel they have got low self-esteem. And when the patient goes into adult, he develops into anxiety, depression. They have got a reduced academic performance. They have got reduced work productivity, and of course, impaired sexual performance and low life quality scores has been observed. And this is all which affects if you are not treating allergic rhinitis properly. So this is a slide which has told me that this is the time, this is the place where you have to take this disorder very seriously because it has got tremendous impact on quality of life. So how do you classify? You classify as a mild and moderate to severe. Moderate to severe means what? Somebody has got symptoms which we already described, which cause a lot of sleep disturbances, impairment of school and work performance, impairment of daily activities or leisure activities or sports activities, and troublesome symptoms. They are very difficult to cope up with this. They're basically miserable with the symptoms. If they are there, then it is mild, then it is moderate to severe. If they are not there, then only like a sneezing, rhinorrhea, nasal obstruction, not bothersome, then it is categorized as a mild. It is important because when you are formulating a treatment for mild and moderate to severe, certain drugs which you are going to choose at the end. So it is very important to classify. There are different classifications. One is mild and moderate to severe. Another, it is called as intermittent and persistent. Intermittent means it's a 4 number which you are supposed to remember, less than 4 days in a week and less than 4 weeks at a time. If somebody gets a symptom and if the symptom lasts only for 2 days or 2 days or 1 day in a week or something like that, or somebody has got less than 4 weeks of a symptom, then it is like an intermittent type of a symptom. And somebody has got more than that, it is called as more than 4 days or more than 4 weeks. More than 4 days in a week and more than 4 weeks, it is called as persistent. So this is also important. It is persistent and intermittent is different basically from chronic. Chronic is something which we use for chronic rhinosinusitis, which is more than 12 weeks. So either person of a mild will have intermittent symptoms or persistent symptoms, and accordingly he will have treatment modalities which are going to offer. And the one who is moderate to severe also will have intermittent and persistent symptoms. There is another classification which is a very popular classification in US FDA, which is called as seasonal, which is most of the times you can say episodic or intermittent, that type of a thing. And perennial means it is throughout year. Somebody who has got a perennial allergic rhinitis, he is a candidate for long-term treatment. And he is a candidate for lot many investigations, including allergen, skin prick allergen test. And he is a candidate where he is bound to have more of an additional allergic disorders like asthma and all. So this is US FDA classification based on seasonal and based on the occurrence of the symptom. Seasonal, it is particular time in a year where the pollination occurs, and perennial, it is throughout the year. Most of the time, perennial symptoms are due to indoor allergens and seasonal symptoms are due to outdoor allergens. But sometimes a patient of a perennial symptoms, when gets exposed to pollination or it gets exposed to seasonal type of basically allergens, he gets exacerbations. So perennial with seasonal is also one of the classifications. So let us see seasonal allergic rhinitis, what does it mean? Symptoms of seasonal allergic rhinitis are predictable and reproducible from year to year. People always say, I am better till March, April. All of a sudden, I start getting cold, whatever, sneezing, cough, or whatever, all the symptoms of allergic rhinitis. And I'm better after 2 to 3 months, and whole of a year, I don't get anything. So he has got a predictable thing. He can always say, okay, this is the month, this is the time. Or he says that I go to this area, I go to my village, or something like that, whatever. And he gets that due to change of environment and change of weather, where the different type of he's exposed to different type of allergens, he says that for particular season, particular place, he gets the allergy. and most of the time they are due to pollens from the trees, grasses, and weeds. Generally, it is not like that. Sometimes the name which is given to that type of a fever does means that is the cause. So rose fever does not mean that it is caused by roses. It is because when the roses bloom, at that time, at the same time, grasses pollinate. Somebody who is allergic to pollens of grasses, he develops the symptoms, and at the same time roses also are blooming, so people call it as a rose fever. The similar story for hay fever. Hay fever, there is no fever at all. If you differentiate hay fever from cold, sometimes cold due to viral infection will have basically maybe some 6, 7, 8 days cold may be there, but there the symptoms will be different because there it may or may not be associated fever. But hay fever definitely is not a fever. Hay fever is another name to allergic rhinitis. And hay fever is not caused by hay. Hay means what? Is a stack, basically grass which is cut and kept there for after drying, which is there. You can basically pile for store. You can store that for usage in the time where it is not available. But when you store that, certain pollens and certain molds which are seen, molds are growing in that hay, and certain weed pollens are seen during that hay, basically cutting of the hay grasses. At that time, commonly the symptoms are seen, so people say that it is a hay fever. Hay fever is nothing but it is a allergic rhinitis, and due to mold, it is a fungus which causes the allergic rhinitis, and it is not the grass which is cut. Perennial allergic rhinitis is mostly commonly we have seen that it is because of indoor allergens like dust mites. Dust mites are very small type of mites which are seen only under the microscope. Cockroaches causes a lot of basically if you see the dust which occurs out of cockroaches, maybe because of the excreta or maybe because of so many things shedding or something, or maybe part of his body, it also causes a lot of allergens. Mold spores, we know. Animal danders, these are animal danders. Actually, it is not the animal you can say hair which causes actually allergic disorders. It is the skin and the debris and the dead skin which is shed and which causes basically small particulation, and which is a specific, basically it is called as animal dander. It causes allergic rhinitis. Aero allergens like tropical and subtropical climate, you can see pollination. We have seen trees, weeds, and grasses, and occupational exposure is definitely one has to consider. There are certain things which you see like allergic shiners, denim organ lines or folds, transverse nasal crease, allergic faces, which are very commonly seen in allergic rhinitis. We have got few pictures. When we see that, I will explain those things. If somebody wants to examine a patient of allergic rhinitis, he will see that nasal mucosa is pale bluish, pallor with turbinate edema is there. Somebody can see the clear rhinorrhea which is dropping, or maybe just a postnasal drip. Or somebody would say a hyperplastic lymphoid tissue, which is a cobblestoning, which can be seen on the posterior pharyngeal wall. And one has to also examine tympanic membrane, because most of the times it is associated with retracted membrane or serous fluid, which is collected due to eustachian tube dysfunction or block. So these are few pictures just to break the continuity, because it is a continuous jargon which is going on. You can see here a person is sneezing, here a person is coughing, here person has got clear rhinorrhea. Here you can see basically dairy organ, this is folds. Here you can see allergic shiners. Here you can see allergic salute, and you can see very clearly transverse line secondary appears due to allergic salute. If you try and do allergic salute like this, you will find that the moment you try to do this, the crease is going to happen. That is different story. But you open up little bit, and your nasal blockage which is there, which goes off for immediately for some time. So these are some pollens in summer, in spring, in summer, in fall, in winter. In spring you see tree pollens, in summer you see grass pollens, in fall you see weed pollens, in winter you see molds. This is some indoors, basically. These are molds. These are molds which are seen. You can see a bread, piece of bread showing mold. These are the molds which are grown in laboratory. You can see these corners of the room where there is a lot of leakage of water, maybe because of rains or maybe because of some other reason. But there is a lot of growth of fungus which you can see here. And we always ask the history when the patient comes to us with a case of allergic disorder. Do their walls are damp? Is there any growth of fungus in their house? Because molds, fungi are very common type of indoor allergen. Whatever treatment you do, whatever good drugs you use, whatever proper technique you explain, unless and until you address to the situation, this situation, patient is not going to be better. There are certain mites which are seen in the fabric. There are certain mites which are seen in the dust. So these are basically, and then pet danders are there. Your cockroach mice and pets are also one of the indoor allergens. Look at this child who is sneezing, which is whole of a background. You can see pollinated, basically all weeds which is there. There are different type of weeds. Just for our relaxation of eyes, I have put the pictures. These are all different type of weeds. Weeds are nothing but these are the plants which are unwanted plants at some specific places. These are the plants which grow, they pollinate, they just spread the pollens, and because of that somebody gets allergic rhinitis. I could see that people are raising the hands, but I really don't know. I will take up the questions or your difficulties or queries at the end. But definitely I'll try to solve your queries in my capability. You can see this dust mite. See these cat and dogs, danders basically. These are not the hair which is shed by the cat or dog, which causes a lot of allergy. It is dander which is more important. Of course, cockroach, everybody's house must be there. One has to take care of cockroaches. Unless and until you take care of that, the treatment is going to go west. Of course, mice, and you have to take care of everything when it comes to prevention and treatment. So this is a hay which is getting stored during rainy season. Sometimes you find difficult to get that, so people store like this. And when you store, there is a lot of fungi, a lot of molds basically, which are seen over here, black colored, and they grow heavily. And as they are spread, the people get allergic to that. And now let us move to the journey. What is the natural course of the disease? Generally, it is a disorder which we don't see less than 2 years of age. Less than 2 years of age, what we see is atopic dermatitis and not allergic rhinitis. So somebody who is getting allergic rhinitis, which is less than 2 years, one should think twice before diagnosing. Because when it comes to perennial allergic rhinitis, or you can say persistent or whatever it may be, due to aeroallergen, it takes at least 2 seasons of exposure. It is not that today I have got exposed to allergen, tomorrow I'll be symptomatic due to allergic rhinitis. No, it takes a lot of time to develop allergic manifestation, to get sensitized properly, and to mount a response after exposure to an allergen. So it takes a lot of time. So it is very rarely seen in less than 2 years of age. Generally, this disorder, if not treated properly, it just goes into adulthood. Sometimes it just remits, but most of the times, if not treated properly, goes in adulthood. But in adults, it never starts as of a sudden, especially in olders. It is a disease which starts in a pediatric population in children and goes into adulthood. So how this happens? Allergen once gets sensitized, then allergen plus IgE. IgE is on the mast cell. There are two reactions. This is little bit going to be theory, but we will come to know why it is important, because our treatment is based on this. When allergen combines with a sensitized mast cell, we all know there is a degranulation mast cell which occurs. It is the first response. It is the first response which occurs. With this degranulation, there is the release of certain inflammatory mediators. These are the names. Out of that, histamine you can say, and then prostaglandin 2, and these all cause symptoms. So important function in sustaining chronic infection. Basically, even though there is response of mast cell, which is attributed to early phase reaction, continuous exposure causes mast cell to be a cause for sustaining chronic, not infection actually, sustaining chronic inflammation actually. And late phase reaction, the cells which are involved here are mast cells, and in late phase the cells are different: basophils, eosinophils, neutrophil, mast cells, mononuclear cells. Early phase reaction occurs within seconds to minutes. Late phase reactions occur generally after 4 to 8 hours. And it is again due to these cells which get infiltrated into the mucosa. Eosinophils release such type of inflammatory mediators and they cause the symptoms. Basically, inflammation of the mucosa, excessive secretion, blockade, all this happens because of inflammation. There are certain conditions which are associated with allergic rhinitis. Out of that, allergic conjunctivitis is almost 60%. Acute or chronic sinusitis is also seen. Asthma 38%. Asthmatic patients have 78% chance that they will have allergic rhinitis. Atopic dermatitis, to begin with, it is 19.3%. At the age advances, the percentage decreases because it is a disease of more of a less than 2 years old or children of a early age group. And some oral allergy syndrome like that, somebody has got some sort of allergy, then the patient, the moment he eats that substance to whom it is allergic, he finds that there is a swelling, itching of the lips, tongue, palate, and then even a throat. And he has got basically that feeling which of itching. Sometimes we come across the people saying that I ate this fruit and after that my throat started itching immediately. This is nothing but oral allergy syndrome. Other conditions like eustachian tube dysfunction and concomitant serous and acute otitis media, sleep disorders, and migraine headaches are also seen. We all know allergic mark. What I was describing to begin with, people first develop food allergy, atopic dermatitis by 1 year of age, peaks, then later on asthma. And allergic rhinitis, actually, they have seen that it has picked up, but it is not like that. So allergic conjunctivitis, this is only coexisting condition which I am talking about. Rest of the conditions are not going to be discussed today, because allergic rhinitis and allergic conjunctivitis most of the times go hand in hand. And the treatment of allergic conjunctivitis has been found that it automatically resolves allergic conjunctivitis. So up to 60% have concomitant allergic conjunctivitis. It presents with itching, tearing, congenital edema, hyperemia, watery discharge, burning, photophobia, eyelid edema, and generally symptoms are bilateral. If you get these symptoms, if they are unilateral, then this is not allergic rhinitis. Symptoms has to be bilateral. I have got a patient. There was one patient who is a 3.5, 4 years old. He always used to, when I used to make him to lie down on examination coach, he used to always close his eyes. He was a case of recurrent cold and cough. He always used to close, and I could see that he has got a lot of watering, which used to start immediately. A classical case of photophobia, burning, watery discharge. All these things happen in spite of somebody is having hyperemia, or you can say red eye. So one has to be one should know that allergic conjunctivitis can present only with photophobia, burning, and discharge without hyperemia. But somebody has got photophobia, one has to keep in mind that it can have some other disorder also. Somebody has got change in vision, also one has to see to it that he needs ophthalmology reference. And of course, if somebody has got dry eyes, which are refractory treatment on corneal abnormality like scarring or something like that, then it is better you should go ahead with ophthalmic opinion. But as long as it is a part of allergic conjunctivitis, you need not bother. So if you want to diagnose a case of allergic rhinitis, which are the 4 questions you are supposed to ask? Very simple. Do you have or have you ever had hay fever with the symptoms complex, which classically which we have described like sneezing, coughing, and nose block, and all other things? Do your parents or any of your sibling, maybe brother and sister, have or they ever had hay fever? Means basically allergic rhinitis. Do your allergy symptoms vary when you go from place to place? Yeah, sometimes we have seen so many people talking. I always feel better when I go to my native, or when I always feel better when I come to this particular, say, city or this particular place. Why it happens? It happens because of change of weather, change of climate, change of aero allergens which they suffer from. And is there any specific trigger that always sets off your allergy symptoms? Means what? There is a doctor in our area who has got an allergy to the scent and strong odors. The moment some patient comes in his cabin who has already put a perfume, he immediately starts sneezing and he just starts pouring basically watery discharge. So this is how a specific trigger, if it is there, one has to keep oneself away. So these are the questions. If you ask, then probably you may come to know that this patient has got allergic rhinitis. Again, I would say if you have got a hay fever, if your parents have hay fever, if your symptoms vary from place to place, or if you have got any identifiable specific trigger. Indications of allergic testing. Now, this is how you diagnose. It's mostly clinical diagnosis, nothing else. But the diagnosis of a particular allergen causing allergic rhinitis occurs only after allergy testing. Allergy testing means what? Either you will do IgE levels, maybe sort of in vivo, but basically IgE levels, specific and non-specific. General total IgE levels will be raised more than 100, more than 6 years, which we already said, or some sort of a specific IgE levels. If you see, you can definitely go for it. They are very costly type of investigations, but sometimes when skin prick allergy test is not available, one can go ahead with it. So indications of allergy testing are: if the patient's symptoms prove difficult to manage, you have tried your level best at your place, but patient is not coming under control. The triggers for the symptoms are not apparent. You are not able to find everything you have tried, basically permutation, combination, stop this, stop that, take care of your bed sheets, take care of your environment, everything, but patient is not getting better. And if you want to demonstrate that patient is sensitive, you want to diagnose that this patient is a case of allergic rhinitis, nothing else. And when you suspect that I'm saying that this particular allergen is causing the disease, and in spite of taking care of that also, patient is not improving. So to confirm that, one can go ahead with it. So it is sensitization can be demonstrated with either allergy skin testing, in vitro test, or allergen specific immunoglobulin, that is IgE. So, importance of allergy testing. It facilitates avoidance of the allergens. If you have got pre-hand information that these are the things he is allergic to, then you can easily counsel the parents saying that these are the things better you avoid. You can, on the basis of that, you can categorize few of your patients and post them from allergen immunotherapy. Allergen immunotherapy is excellent tool for which specialist or allergy specialist consultants offer to the patient, by which his symptoms, not only symptoms are abated, but his life becomes very easy. From a miserable to very joyful life he enjoys on allergic immunotherapy, which I have seen on one or two patients which I have sent to allergy consultant. They have started with immunotherapy and they are doing fine. 6-7 years we were trying everything, patients were not responding. The moment patient was referred to specialist and he identified a particular allergen, he started with immunotherapy and patient is doing fine. And definitely, if you know, then you can basically reduce the chronic medications depending upon the situation. So in vitro means which is done in the lab. IG test is more expensive. It can be done when skin testing is not available, or it can be performed when there is an extensive skin disease or some sort of issues. When you do the skin testing, I already mentioned you, when there is no clear diagnosis, when the symptoms are poorly controlled, when inadequate clinical response to nasal glucocorticoids, after listening to this lecture, somebody will start glucocorticoids, but if he is not seeing the such type of a benefit, then he is a candidate for skin testing. Somebody has got coexisting asthma or recurrent sinusitis, he is also a candidate. Then somebody's in vitro test comes negative, or sometimes the patient only says that, sir, why don't we go for skin testing because I am really not feeling better. Then that may be the case. Or you have got a strong sense that this patient of allergic rhinitis will be benefited with skin testing. So what are the treatment options? Coming 10 to 15 minutes, we are going to discuss in depth about the treatment, because two parts of my topic. One is to get to know you about allergic rhinitis, which part is over, and another part, the second half of my topic, is treatment. Treatment, it depends upon frequency and severity of the symptoms. We have seen that mild and moderate to persistent. So the category of the drugs which are going to be used for mild are going to be definitely less and different than those who are going to use for severity of the symptoms. Depending on the age of the patient, we are seeing patient of around 4 to 6 years old. We are seeing patient around 10 to 12 years old. We are seeing patient 6 months to 1 year old. The drug doses would be varying, and the drug delivery systems basically which are going to use may vary. And if somebody has got concurrent conditions like allergic rhinitis patient having asthma, allergic rhinitis patient having dermatitis, or allergic rhinitis patient having chronic sinusitis, then the treatment, you have to address those situations also. So in nutshell, if you want to give a comprehensive treatment to a patient of allergic rhinitis, three things only. One is allergen avoidance, which is of a prime importance. Pharmacotherapy, however, pharmacotherapy of a good quality, good compliance, everything you offer, unless and until you take care of preventive measures, it's not going to give you satisfactory results. And of course, immunotherapy is not our domain at all. You need a specialist opinion. So pharmacotherapy, which are the things which are there in our armamentarium? Oral antihistaminics, maybe sedating, not sedating, basically older ones, newer ones, generation wise, first generation, second generation, all. Oral decongestants and combinations like phenylephrine or combinations with antihistaminics. Nasal decongestion like xylometazoline, then napazole or something, many of such like that. Penile antihistaminics like azilastine, and basically I'll come to that. Phenyl cromolyn, phenyl corticosteroids, leukotriene receptor antagonist and comorbid combinations, oral steroids, and immunotherapy. Out of that, phenyl corticosteroid is the crux of this presentation. So which are the corticosteroids which are there in our armamentarium? One is beclomethasone, triamcinolone acetonide, unisolide, budesonide. These are the first, which are not in bold, are first generation. Mometazone furoate, fluticasone propionate, fluticasone furoate, cyclesonide, and betamethasone sodium phosphate. These are the newer ones. The difference is all these are same, but the frequency which is differs from older and newer ones. If you see the efficacy, almost it's same. So what are the features of glucocorticoid, intranasal glucocorticoids? There is no significant differences in the efficacy that we already seen. They're effective in treatment of nasal congestion, which is often does not respond to oral histamines. You have tried a lot of levocetirizine, fexofenadine, then your regular chlorpheniramine maleate, combinations with phenylephrine, everything has been tried, but not getting relief. So there, the place of glucocorticoid nasal spray, that is intranasal corticosteroid, comes. There are severe symptoms which requires daily use on chronic basis. Then in that also you have to use glucocorticoids, intranasal steroids. The most effective single maintenance therapy if you see many of the drugs which are available for treatment of allergic rhinitis, you end up in prescribing. To begin with, you will prescribe, say, oral antihistaminics, sometimes even leukotriene inhibitors, sometimes local nasal decongestants, sometimes local antihistaminics. But what remains at the end is lowest possible dose of glucocorticoid, and that is a maintenance dose which can be given to the patients years together without any harm. It causes a very few side effects in recommended doses. The doses, even if you give sometimes in basically over enthusiasm, if you feel like giving more doses, then it has been seen that even if you double the dose, in want of that patient is not responding, instead of changing the molecule, you try to change the dose. Doubling the dose is not going to be additionally benefit, but at the same time, it has been seen that it is also not going to cause a lot of harm to the patient. There are certain newer preparations which act within 3 to 12 hours. Onset of action of a few hours, maximal effect may require several days to weeks. Even if you start intranasal corticosteroid, there is a response, no doubt. But to have a persistent good response, you will have to have some days or weeks to go. It is not going to, you have to counsel the patient that today you are starting that intranasal steroids. From tomorrow, your patient is going to be symptom free. No, it is not going to happen. You have to wait. You have to wait till long, sometimes maybe weeks. May be used in patients with mild or episodic symptoms. Sometimes if somebody is going to go to, say, to as a guest to some other city or some other place where there is a pet in their house, and he feels that he has got an allergy, he was having pet, he has removed that pet, but the place where he is going to go, the pet is going to be there, he is going to get exposed to that. Then he is a person where he can start a little bit early corticosteroids on SOS basis, and he can withdraw after coming to his own place, maybe after a week or 2 weeks time. So this is how it is helpful. So the way we have seen in asthma, we step up the doses and all that. But here what we see, we start with maximal dose, then step down, and try to come down to a very minimal effective dose. The advantage and disadvantage about these preparations are only just fragrances. Somebody will say, no, my product is little better than taste. Sometimes would say, no, there is there's a drop down in the throat which causes bad bitter taste. Or sometimes somebody would say there is a nasal irritation. Accordingly, that you can select your product. And to avoid that, this irritation, nasal irritation, and fragrance and this taste, there are 2 molecules which are available. Cyclosonide, these are all called as dry aerosol formulations. That is cyclosonide hydrofluoroalkane and beclomethasone dipropionate hydro. This is a new molecule which they have launched. So these dry aerosol inhalation instructions, how one should take these dry inhalations, very important. But I will take this slide later on. There are certain drugs I just want you to know, which we have already just discussed. This slide is a busy slide, but you have to take into consideration only one molecule as an example. You can see there are certain drugs which are not recommended for 2 to 6 years of age. Out of that, beclomethasone is there, fluticasone propionate is there, and budesonide is there. But there are certain drugs like fluticasone furoate and fluticasone propionate. You can see there is a 50 microgram spray when it comes to propionate, and when it comes to furoate, it is come to 27.5. This fluticasone furoate has been found in combination with azilastine and other drugs. So if you are happy with using fluticasone furoate, good, because it is still recommended in 2 to 6 years of age group, and the dose does not vary much. 1 to 2 sprays in each nostril 2 times in a day. This is also 2 times in a day, and this is also 2 times in a day. But mometasone, if you see, then it is only once in a day. Here there is a mistake. So read it as BID. So I'll take an example of mometasone. Mometasone begins to work 2 to 4 weeks before pollen season. If somebody wants to use it, somebody identifies that this is a seasonal type of allergic rhinitis, and my patient tells me that in this particular month I get symptoms of allergic rhinitis, and they are very categorically very particular. They will always say, okay, this is the time. They'll spot the time proper. Then you have to prime them, or you have to start them 2 weeks, 4 weeks earlier with 50 microgram per spray, which is the dose which they have given. If you are using for 2 to 6 years, one spray in each nostril, one spray in each nostril, one spray in another nostril. If you go for these 12 years, the dose does not change. But if you go for 12 years, the dose is 2 sprays in each nostril. So it is very simple thing. If you diagnose a case of allergic rhinitis, you want to prescribe intranasal steroid. What you will do, you will select one of the molecules. Out of that, if I try to select a mometasone, because I found that this is a once in a day, once in a day, once in a day, it is very easy. I don't have to remember much, 2 to 6 years, 6 to 12 years, one spray in each nostril, one spray in each nostril. Okay, I'm done with it. If I'm fond of giving fluticasone, there is no much difference in any of the molecule as far as efficacy goes, as far as side effect goes, as far as basically convenience goes, nothing, all are more or less same. So how to take that? This is a very practically important. You have advised, now you have to give this particular intranasal steroid, but how patient should take it? What he has to do, he has to identify the drug, because if it is on multiple inhalers type of a thing which looks similar, then you have to identify this is the drug which is for nasal use, intranasal use. He has to first shake. These steps are very important. You have to shake the spray. You have to prime, means what? You have to just accentuate outside so that you can see that the dose of a last your accentuation comes in, goes out in the air, so that that canister is filled properly and which can deliver the dose in the intranasal area. Before that, you have to blow the nose. You have to bend little forward. You have to block one nostril. Why you have to bend little forward? Because this is the way you, if you use it, you are making the delivery of the dose to the area where it should go. You are supposed to point towards, not towards the septum, but towards the lateral wall of the nose, nostril. If you put it towards the septum, then the chances that irritation will be more. So you have to inhale slowly, just accentuate the dose, sniff little bit, and that's it. And just wipe the tip and store it properly. The same thing you do it for dry aerosol. Only thing is you have to just keep the head tilt back. Here you bend down, there you keep head tilt back. If you want to have good compliance, which is the prime importance, then you should select the preparation which is once a daily preparation, because flunisolide is a twice daily prescription. Proper technique is important, proper training is important. There are some additional measures, like somebody has got casting in the nose, then one has to use saline, normal saline nasal washes or normal saline sprays before using this atrocortisone. Otherwise, the dose delivery may not occur. If you see that nose is totally blocked, then you should use local decongestants like xylometazoline, oxymetazoline for that purpose. You have to proper counsel the parents how the patient is going to improve, how the dose schedule should be, when they should come back, how they should avoid the allergens. You have to keep them into regular follow-ups, because it is not a treatment which is going to be short lasting. It is a chronic treatment, and you should always tell them that you should try to avoid self-medication. There are no much side effects which have been seen. No HP axis suppression. There is a small effect of growth has been seen with fluticasone, but which is not basically not to be bothersome. There is no adrenal suppression like which we see in oral steroids. Caution is needed when side effect will be additive. Like if somebody has got allergic rhinitis, allergic dermatitis, atopic dermatitis, asthma, he will be using different ways of different steroids. Basically, one is inhaler, one is intranasal, one is topical, then there may be additive effects which can be seen, and then you have to be little bit observant. But there is definitely no effect on bone marrow density, intraocular pressure, cataract formation. So local side effects means what? You send a patient home, but you have to tell that there is going to be little bit irritation or burning in the nose, which is normal, and which will definitely, once you get adjusted to the technique, it will go. Sometimes one will get a discomfort because of there is a runoff of that drug into the throat. Sometimes it causes little bit bitter taste, and somebody would get epistaxis. You enthusiastically prescribe mometasone and whatever budesonide or whatever fluticasone, fluticasone nasal spray. Patient goes home, comes back after 2 weeks or week and says that he has got a nasal bleed. Doctor, I was quite okay when you are prescribing some oral medications. This is something new which you have started, and my child has started getting blood in the basically nasal secretions. In that situation, it's a panic situation, because you as a generalist, you have started the treatment. Then you should know that epistaxis has got two type of presentations. One is a very scanty and one is a very frank type of thing. When it is a scanty, means just a mucosal streak is there in a mucosa, you should not worry, but at the same time you have to stop the medication, and you can again join the same after, say, it resolves after, say, time of around week or 10 days. But when it comes to a frank epistaxis, then that is the time where you are supposed to avoid glucocorticoid, intranasal steroids. That is the time you are not supposed to use. Probably you are not supposed to use that for henceforth after that. And sometimes, most of the time, if you see that the technique which they are, you have to observe the technique. It may be sometimes mechanical issue which is causing the epistaxis. If you rule out that, and if you explain the proper technique, then epistaxis is not a major issue. Very rarely people have seen septal perforation also. Once in a while, you see that there is a polyps which are there. Chronic nasal inflammation is there. In that, as a generalist, if you see that there are certain differentials which should come in your mind, and you should be very happy, because nasal polyposis is not a feature of allergic rhinitis. The moment you see polyposis, nasal polyps, you should suspect that there is something else which is cooking up there. There is no drug interaction which is very commonly seen with local intranasal steroids. There are certain other drugs which can be used, like saline nasal drops. They are available as a normal saline. They are available as a 3%, and now somebody introduced 7% also. But more or less they are same, may be used for a chronic rhinitis. Most of the time they are used for chronic allergic rhinosinusitis. They can be used as a spray, or they can be used as a irrigation. Irrigation means in Marathi it is called as neti. In Ayurveda it is called as neti. Irrigation helps to just wash out your allergens. When somebody gets exposed to allergen, if a simple nasal sprays, saline sprays, irrigation will wash out, and which will decrease the burden, and which is going to help to improve the symptoms. So they are helpful if you see there is atrophic rhinitis, there is crusted, or there is a lot of mucus which is there, which thick mucus which is there. And even if you are using a good dose of a steroid, it is not getting delivered on the mucosa, it is not getting absorbed over there. And sometimes you may fail into that. So what you have to do is, judiciously you can use normal saline drops to have more effect of additive effect with intranasal steroids. Some antihistamines which are there, first generation, second generation, we all know, we all use. There is a chlorpheniramine maleate which is there. There is a cetirizine, there is a levocetirizine, there is a loratadine, there is a desloratadine, there is a fexofenadine, and so on and so forth. So many. Now bilastine has also come in the market. So many things are there. But more or less, if you see, it is a sedative and non-sedative. Non-sedative means does not cause sedation at all. It is not like that. Sedation will be less in that. Sometimes you can get sedation in non-sedatives also. But nowadays, for the better, basically the dosing is there, which is once in a day, and dosing in a first generation, which is 3 to 4 times in a day, becomes very convenient to use newer type of antihistaminics. They reduce itching, sneezing, and rhinorrhea, but they are very less effective in nasal congestion. So when there is a nasal congestion, there is a nose block. What is going to be helpful is nasal decongestant, or what is going to helpful is intranasal steroids. So for this, for that matter, I have taken an example of these two drugs which are very much popular at present. One is a levocetirizine and another is a fexofenadine. Levocetirizine is available as 2.5 mg per 5 ml, or you can say 0.5 mg per 1 ml, and 5 milligram tablet, which is exactly half of your cetirizine. So this half dose does the job of cetirizine. Levocetirizine is a mesomer of cetirizine. It is not to be used less than 2 years officially, but people do use that in little bit lower doses. But in adult, it can be used as a 5 milligram. No need of prescribing 5 milligram BD. It is not going to give you much of a effect rather than additive benefit. But a very severe rhinorrhea is there. Sometimes you can go for twice in a day, 5 milligram twice in a day. The similar thing here, 2.5 milligram twice in a day. But as in when regularly you are using 6 years to 11 years, the dose is 2.5 milligram, which comes to around 5 ml once in a day. And less than 6 months to 6 years, it is half of that. That is 2.5 ml. Okay, this is levocetirizine, and another is fexofenadine. Fexofenadine, there is a lot many basically issues. It is available at 30 milligram, 60 milligram, 120 milligram, 180 milligram. When it comes to 180 milligram and 120 milligram, they are basically once in a day doses. When it is a 60 milligram, it is more of an adult dose. And when it is a 30 milligram, it is 6 years to 11 years. But sometimes off label or whatever it may be, the references say that it can be used about 6 months also, a little bit lower dose. But I would say for 2 to 6 years, you can use 15 milligram BD, 6 years to 11 years, 30 milligram BD, and more than 12 years, 60 milligram BD. Our age-old CPM, which is there in all the formulations, as a 2 milligram per 5 ml, the dose is more or less we prescribe arbitrarily 2.5 mg, 2.5 ml for less than 6 years and 5 ml for more than 6 years. Adult dose is 4, but the problem here is CPM needs to be given every 4 to 6 hours, and which causes a lot of sedation. So local antihistamines like azilastine and olopatadine. Actually, I was not remembering this in earlier slide. Olopatadine, very difficult to pronounce also, but azilastine is one should remember because it is combined with fluticasone for chronic symptoms. The one who has got a chronic rhinitis, chronic allergic rhinitis, or one who has got a very severe type of a symptoms, there this local antihistaminics comes as an additive effect with intranasal steroids. They have some anti-inflammatory effect. They improve nasal congestion, and the onset is quite rapid. It is useful when only intranasal corticosteroids are not effective. But the combination with this azilastine is approved for more than 12 years. But sometimes it has been seen that lower age groups also people are prescribing. The dose is almost around 137 microgram plus 50 milligram of fluticasone propionate, and this combination generally people use. But the only worrisome factor is compliance because it has got a run of bitter taste. Cromolyn sodium, it is a mast cell stabilizer. It is locally used. It inhibits histamine. It is good for basically seasonal allergies, and it is, even though it is less effective than intranasal corticosteroids and in antihistamines, it has got a role in prevention of seasonal allergies. If somebody is not indicated to use intranasal corticosteroids, cromolyn sodium is also a good option. Piperotropium bromide is also the same. It is used 30 minutes prior to the exposure. In seasonal allergic rhinitis, the most effective when initiated just prior to the pollen season. If you use it after onset of the symptoms, then probably this may not work the way it should be. So it has to be started before getting exposed, and the time provided here is 30 minutes before getting exposed to the allergen. Montelukast, there are no issues about Montelukast, but it has been seen over a period of time. It is associated with dream abnormalities, insomnia, anxiety, depression, suicidal thinking, and even suicide. This is something which I have come to know while I was reading about Montelukast. So I will be asking you to keep away from Montelukast. If the parents come and tell you there are certain changes which they notice in the child, because Montelukast is used for longer duration. It is a leukotriene receptor antagonist. It is helpful in nasal congestion, sneezing, nasal itching. It is mostly combined with oral antihistaminics, as well as it is also available as a solo drug. The dose is very simple. We use it day-to-day practice. 15 years, it's 10 milligram. 6 years to 15 years, it is 5 milligram. We used to remember 12 years here, but what is reference says that 6 years to 12 years, it is 5 milligram, and less than 6 years, but you can start from 6 months, that is 4 milligram. 4 milligram tablet, which is there, which is available. Oxymetazoline is a drug which is a fantastic nasal decongestant. I have got a couple of slides left, only 5 minutes more. But if you use it for more than 3 to 5 days or more than 7 days, then the chances that this patient will have what is called as rhinitis medicamentosa. So whenever you are prescribing oxymetazoline or such type of drug, xylometazoline or nafazoline or phenylephrine, you should warn the parent that you are not supposed to use this drug for more than 5 days or more than 3 days. Most of the time it should be used as a SOS basis. It is used as a 2 to 3 sprays 2 times in a day for 3 to 5 days. When it is used in combination with glucocorticoid, basically nasal intranasal steroids, then you can use it till long, maybe say a month or two, whatever, till you get there, because your drug delivery has to be there. When there's hypertrophic turbinate there, when drug delivery is not going to be proper, you can use that SOS basis. So when it comes to prescribing, when a patient of mild or episodic symptom comes, what is you are going to offer is a second generation oral antihistaminic. If it's going to be better, good. Sometimes you can use local antihistaminic, that is agilastine. But if his symptoms are not getting controlled, then you can go ahead with intranasal corticosteroids. But for the persistent and moderate or moderate to severe symptoms, the drug of choice is glucocorticoid nasal sprays. You can, to begin with, somebody who has got profuse rhinorrhea, a lot of symptoms, you can antihistamines for some days, but then you can withdraw and continue with glucocorticoid sprays alone. So when to refer to allergy consultants? Patients whose symptoms are severe and refractory to therapy, definitely we are going to seek a a specialist opinion. When there are comorbid conditions like allergic rhinitis with dermatitis with asthma, we are going to take opinion. When you want to do skin test, allergy test, you are going to take opinion. And when you need immunotherapy, definitely you are going to take a treatment. Any patient whom you see that your patient is not responding to any of your treatment, you have got a difficulty in diagnosing a case, or your basically patient is not responding the way you expect, it is better to have allergy consultant than just pushing the things. You can also take the opinion of otorhinologist. So my take-home message is my last slide. Actually, what my sir, Dr. Mahesh Moite sir, says that when you deliver any presentation, it is you who is going to learn more than the people who attend the session. So this is the same thing which has happened to me. I have got a great insight in allergic rhinitis while preparing this subject. This was around 110 slides presentation. I have made it to 60 slides presentation just half an hour back. Otherwise, it would have run to 2 hours. So thank you for being patient and listening to this. This is my last slide. Allergic rhinitis is a common disease in pediatric practice. It is associated with other allergic disorders and comorbidities. It has tremendous impact on quality of life. Diagnosis mostly clinical. Intranasal corticosteroid is the best option of treatment in moderate to severe perennial chronic allergic rhinitis. Montelukast is not much beneficial, but still, if somebody has got severe symptoms, one can use for a shorter period and then get away with it. Allergen prevention is mainstay of the treatment, and allergy consultant's opinion is must. Thank you for patient listening. I am here to answer your queries if they are in my capacity. Thank you for patient listening. Thank you, Alembic. Thank you, Ashish, who is sitting next to me. Thanks a lot. And
Thank you,
for
sir,
this.
for this wonderful presentation. We have a questions in question answer session here. The first question. Good evening, everyone. A patient whose age is 51, no cough and cold, bite in mouth and bring out phlegm from inside. For almost a year after eating, it is a more irritating, not even a fever. Relaxation of giving Montelukast with levocetirizine. Tell you what to do. This is the question, sir. It is a
Actually, good. The question I can understand here. The age is 51 years, so it is really not my domain, but still I'll try to answer in my capacity. No cough and cold, yet spits in the mouth and brings out phlegm from inside. So this is must be having some sort of a chronic bronchitis, if at all he has got. For almost a year after eating, most of the times it is commonly seen. It is more irritating even. Fever is not there, so it is not infection at all. Relaxation of giving Montelukast with levocetirizine, it may be just more or less placebo effect. One needs to diagnose that why is bringing so much sputum, whether there is any lung issues or some sort of a thing which he needs to be taken care, rather than this is some sort of an allergic disease. If at all it turns out to be allergic disease, then there is no cough, there is no cold, very difficult to say.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the next one is the earliest stage to diagnosis of allergic rhinitis.
2 years.
2 years. Okay. And how to confirm the diagnosis of allergic rhinitis?
Allergic rhinitis diagnosis confirmation is very simple. First, it is clinical. Second, basically clinical means symptomatology. The way we read in the books that you examine the nasal discharge under microscope and find out whether there are eosinophil salts, but these are all more of a research tools than a common practice. If you suspect that he has got an allergic rhinitis, then your normal CBC would point somewhere there is a raised in eosinophil count. If it happens that you try to find out what is the IG level of that child, then definitely IG would be more, then it is more likely to be allergic rhinitis. If it is not more, does not rule out as such. Third, if you do specific allergen test and you find out which allergen is causing allergic rhinitis, and that is the confirmatory diagnosis. Or sometimes you can give nasal allergen challenge test. That is also there, but which is not commonly practiced. What one can do is it's a clinical diagnosis, see what is going to be the response. If at all, then if there is a doubt, you can always take a consultation of expert.
Okay, sir. Thank you. The next question is from Dr. Jay Kumar Bhandarkar. Role of injection histoglobin.
Histoglobin is an immunoglobulin which is used by, I have seen many doctors are using, but I could not find a single reference which is there for treatment of allergic rhinitis. So I would say there is no role because I have not come across any reference.
Okay, sir. The next question again is the earliest age to start intranasal corticosteroids.
The problem is technique. If you hold a 2-year-old kid and if you try to put something in the nose, he is not going to allow that. Unless and until he is a very moderate to severe persistent type of bad allergic disorder, it will be very difficult for you to use intranasal steroids at a lower age group. But little bit older age group, you can definitely go. But earliest age, you maybe any, unless and until your technique and all other things are good. But less than 2 years, I would definitely say no, because diagnosis of allergic rhinitis, you have to take it, you have to do it with caution, because if you label somebody as allergic rhinitis, you put on some track of a treatment and you just go on continue the thing and something you miss it. So as long as your question is there, earliest age to start intranasal steroid, if your diagnosis is there more than 2 years, I would say.
Okay. The next question is from Dr. Pramod Wankhede. Sir, you said Montelukast can be used for a short period, but the book says it should be used for at least 3 months.
Actually, Montelukast in allergic rhinitis has got very little effect. It is not better than antihistaminic as long as allergic rhinitis is concerned. When it comes to, say, treating asthma, it is okay. You can give it for 3 months, but that is also nowadays it is going little bit lower on the card. If at all you have got the symptoms which are little bit severe ones, then you can combine with any of your antihistaminic along with this leukotriene inhibitor Montelukast. Give it for 3 months, no issues. But somebody is requiring for more than that, then intranasal steroids along with that, take out Montelukast, take out levocetirizine, continue only with intranasal steroid. If at all you can add intranasal antihistaminic, if at all you can use decongestant SOS. But as far as what I have read for this topic, they have not given good marks to Montelukast for treatment of allergic rhinitis.
Again, sir, one more question from Dr. Lizzie George. Which probiotic have definite role in allergies? Probiotics.
I would not able to tell you the particular strain of probiotic which is helpful in because that is not my domain at all. But definitely there are certain probiotics which are there in the market. They are claiming that they are good for allergy. I am definitely convinced that there is a role of probiotic for treatment of allergies, but which strain, which drug, I really don't know.
Okay. So we're done with the most of the questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for this enlightful talk on allergic rhinitis.